All right, welcome to today's live stream. Just doing what we normally do, where I'll just be hanging out for a bit, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll answer them here. Go ahead and just type them into the live chat, and I will be happy to answer them. Thanks. All right, so if you can hear me, just let me know, because I'm just testing my hotkeys for the push to talk. All right, so Justo Garcia, recommendation on any projects to be doing while taking the web development course. So I'm assuming you're talking about the Web Developer Bootcamp. I would just stick with the projects from the course unless you start getting bored and you find that you're having difficulty staying motivated. And then once you complete a section, you learn a certain technology or skill, then you can come back and create your own personal project. And so when it comes to personal projects, obviously if you have something that you've already had in mind, you'll just want to explore that. But if you can't come up with anything, typically what I tell students to do is just try to mimic an existing website. So just like Colt uses Yelp Camp as a spin-off of Yelp, you could do Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or any of those popular social medias, or just any website. You could do a website for booking airfare or hotels, anything like that. Hey, Predator and Manon, how's it going? So if you're just getting here and you haven't done one of these before, basically just leave your questions in the live chat, and then I'll be answering them here while I'm live. Thanks. Amankant Sharma, how's it going? All right, so the question is, what is Docker and Kubernetes? And then the other one is that we'll answer next is, which is better, Angular or React? So I've only used Docker one time, and I haven't used Kubernetes, so I'm not really the best person to answer that question. But as far as I can tell, Docker is just a way to spin up a server or an environment on your machine that would be exactly the same somewhere else on someone else's machine. So it doesn't matter if you're working on PC and they're working on Linux and the other teammate is working on Mac, you would all have the same environment through Docker. And then I'm not exactly sure what Kubernetes does, but it's just some type of add-on for Docker or something that works in tandem with it. So a quick Google search of both those things should render you some answers really quickly on what those are. Hey, what's up? Ron, glad that you stumbled in. And then Sharma, that's awesome that you're joining from India. Very cool. So back to Manon Betty's question, which is better, Angular or React? This is a really common question, and the short answer is neither. It's just the right tool for the job. So depending on what the job is, you may need Angular or you may need React. In terms of which one you should learn, it just depends on what your goals are. But if you're intending to work at a company, if you're looking for a job, you're going to want to learn the technology that that company is teaching. So find out what your target companies are using, or did I say teaching? Using, and then find out what your target companies are using, and then you'll want to learn that. So which is better? I mean, right now I would say React kind of has the market, but I don't know that it's going to like stamp Angular out or anything like that. So I think they're both very relevant right now, and you'd be fine learning either of them. All right, so Ron's question is, what is the best way of limiting image sizes and having them show up the same size in any gallery-oriented application with or without Bootstrap? So if you're uploading your images to Cloudinary, which you probably should be using Cloudinary or AWS or a similar service. AWS's service is called S3 for image upload. They're going to have tools that allow you to control the resolution, the size, the orientation, all that stuff. So you can just use their API. You can go into the dashboard and do it manually, or you could just add query strings to the URL of the image, and that will manipulate it in real time. So I would look into what Cloudinary has to offer. So Gaber has a question. What is the console log of let x equal -5 for let I equal 0 plus plus x I plus plus console log I plus 1? Let's see here. Let me look at that for a second. I'm going to copy it and take it over into my code editor, so give me just a second to switch screens. And Ron, no problem. Glad that was, hopefully that was helpful. And I forgot to press spacebar. Alright, so real quick, I forgot to press spacebar. Let me turn on my audio real quick while I'm coding. Okay, hopefully you're able to hear me now while I'm coding. Alright, so one of your interview questions was that, what do you think, what's the right answer? So assuming that you're supposed to figure out what this output is, let's look at this. So x is -5, I is 0, you're doing plus plus x, and so plus plus beforehand is different than plus plus after in terms of when it gets incremented versus when it gets returned, and then I plus plus. And so this is the condition right here, and -5 is truthy, and then it's going to go plus plus to -4, plus plus to -3. When it gets to 0, this is a conditional, and so 0 is falsy, so when it gets to 0 it's going to stop. And then I plus plus, I starts at 0, it's going to do 0 plus 1, so the first thing is going to be 1, and then it's going to, I plus plus will make it 1, so it'll end up being 2, 3, 4, etc. So the question is, how many times is this loop going to run before -5 becomes 0? And this is the big kicker, is plus plus x versus x plus plus. And since I haven't done this in a while, I'd have to check. So I can make a guess as to what the correct answer is. But basically, if you have 0 and you do plus plus, then that's going to give you 1. However, if you have plus plus 0, then that's going to give you 0 until the next iteration. So it's actually 1, but it returns the original value, if I'm not mistaken. And so in this case, you have -5. On the first loop, it does plus plus -5 and checks the value of that. So it's going to be, on the first run, it's going to be -5, and then it's going to run again, and it's going to be, the second time around, it's going to be -4, it's going to be plus plus -4, but it's going to leave it at -4. And so then it'll be -3, -2, -1, and then finally 0. And so when it checks on the one that's 0, that's going to be it. It's going to finish running. So I think the output should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can try it and see if I'm close at all. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so it only runs 4 times. And so if we had -5 plus plus, we have to do something like var I is equal to -5 plus plus I. Alright, this is not the right place to be running this because it's got all this crap running in the background. Let me open up another window. Alright, var I is equal to -5. I'm using var instead of let and const, so I don't have to worry about reusing the variable if I wanted to. Plus plus I. Okay, so it does the increment and then it returns it. So what happens when you do I plus plus? I had it backwards. So when you do I plus plus, that's when it returns the same value, but now if we check I, it's -3. Whereas before, now that it's -3, if we did plus plus I, it's going to return -2, and then we check I, and I is -2. So I had it backwards, and that is why instead of -5, we start with -4, and then -3, -2, -1, so it runs 4 times before it hits 0, and so the answer, as you saw, was 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a tricky little question, but basically the root of the question is what's the difference between x plus plus and plus plus x. And so for future, you may want to look that up just to get familiar with it. But if you had explained it like I did, I think the employer would have at least known that you know that there's a difference and that you know why it's doing what it's doing, and hopefully that would have been more important than not knowing, knowing or not knowing offhand that it was 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so wanted to build a job portal site, how to design layout for that from the very beginning. I wouldn't design the layout, I would use a theme, but I mean if you're good with CSS, then you could design it yourself. A lot of people use like Illustrator or Photoshop to make the theme beforehand, and then there's different methods you can use, web design methods, to convert that into CSS. It's up to you how you want to do that. I'm not a web designer, so I'm not super familiar with that stuff. But in terms of building the portal site, how to design the layout, I'm talking about the CSS layout, of course, the theme. If you're talking about the layout of the entire website, like how it's going to work, that's a super loaded question because that's a huge undertaking. I can't explain that in the couple minutes that I have to answer each question, unfortunately. However, if you have time on your hands and you want to learn how to basically set up an overview for a project like that, then check out my Code with Node course. It is free on Udemy. I'll type in the name down here, Code with Node, learn by doing, on Udemy and devsprout.io. And that will teach you how to go through the process of building out a website that is at that scale. Gary Robinson, best place to learn coding? It just depends on your style of learning. If you're the type of person that likes reading books, then that would be the best way. If you're the type of person that likes watching videos, then Udemy or a similar site like Pluralsight would be good, or lynda.com and a couple others. Personally, it just depends on how much you already know. If you're starting from scratch, in my opinion, one of the best places to learn is Colt Steele's The Web Developer Bootcamp. It's a good place to get all the fundamentals down, and then you can go from there. And that's on udemy.com if you're not already familiar with it. You can find it at topratedtechcourses.com. It should be near the top, or maybe not anymore, but it's in there. It is the first one, and right now it has a 4.6 rating. In any event, the other way, of course, would just be to read books or read documentation or read tutorials. You can always watch YouTube videos, learn how to do it for free. Just be careful not to spread yourself too thin, and make sure that you get a mentor so that when you do run into walls and questions that you just can't solve on your own, you're able to get answers to those questions. And so if you can't find a mentor, then at least get familiar with using like stackoverflow.com, or find a community on Facebook or Discord or even YouTube where you can ask those kinds of questions. So this is a question that I thought I answered the other day. Do you think that I really need a bachelor or another degree to enter into the animation business? I don't really want to be the animator, but I'd rather be the one with the plans. So if you don't know how to animate, I don't think you're going to find a job managing animators or like being the planner or whatever that job title is considered. So a formal education might be key, but you have to ask yourself what your end goal is. So it sounds like you don't really want to do the animating side of things, but you'd rather plan the animations. I don't know if you're talking about like drawing up the storyboards or what, but you're going to need some type of formal education in one way or another. So a degree might be a good place to start. Of course, degrees are expensive, so if you can do it online for cheap or free, that would be a better alternative. Yes, Ron. Query strings are used all over. Very helpful with APIs for being able to access different features from the API. So Akshay had a question about resources on game development using Node. So I do have a game, where is it? Like one course on here, but it's with C#, and it's for a Unity developer to learn to code making games. So I don't know that Nodejs is used a whole lot in gaming development. I'm sure it could be, but I don't think that's its kind of intended use. You'd have to look to see if there's any packages out there that are for making games, and then you have to decide what kind of games you're wanting to make, because maybe Node will help you making some like web-based games, And of course, you'd want to use JavaScript on the front end for most of the interactions and animations and things like that. But I don't know that Nodejs is the best tool for the job. So in terms of finding a resource or a course or anything of that nature, you might be kind of hard up with that. A different programming language might be a better choice. And if you don't know another programming language, you might want to take the time to learn one that is geared specifically towards gaming development. So Sumit's question, hey Sumit, good to see you. My thoughts on React Native versus Flutter. I haven't used either, so I'm not sure the differences there. I know they're both very popular. If it were me and I had to make a mobile application, since I know JavaScript, I would probably pick up React Native. And then I don't know much about Flutter at all, so unfortunately I don't have a really good answer for that question. Sorry. Haseen, how's it going? Gabriel, you're welcome. Tailwind CSS, I'm not sure what that is, Judah. And then Ignacio, not sure. Oh, ++ x is equal to -4. Yep, that's from earlier. Do I watch WWE or AEW? I do not. Hope you're doing well. Do you think templating engines like EJS, Pug, and Handlebars, etc. are still relevant in 2020, or should we just learn a framework like React? They're definitely relevant, and they're not going anywhere. I use EJS a lot because that's what Colt's course teaches. That's what I use in my courses. If I was stuck with just using a backend language and framework, then I would use EJS, especially if I was using Node, obviously. But in terms of learning React, it's a good idea. It's not gonna be a waste of your time. It's a worthwhile investment, especially if your intention is to get a full stack or front end developer, web development job. And so I would definitely recommend it. I'm gonna take a second here to plug my PayPal. If anybody's interested in seeing more of these live streams, feel free to send me $1 or $2 to help support the cause. Much appreciated. Obviously, no pressure there, but super appreciated if anybody does. I got one last night, and that was pretty awesome. All right, so awesome, Gary. You're very welcome, and congratulations on completing the course. Well done. Now check out my Code with Node course. It's a good follow-up to Colt's course. So you know some Java. After taking this course, what's the best path toward learning to use Java in the back end? What technology should I learn? So I don't know Java, but I think the Spring framework may be a good option if you're learning Java for the back end for web development. So you might check out Spring, and that's as much as I know. I don't use Java like at all. Can I put data in MongoDB using React and without using Node.js? So React is front end, so everything that you do in the front end is exposed. And so with MongoDB, you're going to want to connect to a database somewhere, and you're going to need credentials for that. And so you need them to be hidden. And the best way to hide stuff is on the back end, typically in like an environment variable. So while it may be possible to connect to a database just solely using React, probably not secure. Tailwind is a CSS framework like Material. Cool. Yep, that sounds awesome. Not familiar with it, but now I'm kind of interested to check it out. How frequently is Bootstrap used in the industry? Is it frowned upon? I would say quite a bit. Some people prefer to have their designers do it from scratch, but especially in like startups where you don't necessarily have all the money in the world to have a design team, then or at least pay a bunch of people on a design team, it may be easier just to use something like Bootstrap. And if you know the definition of Bootstrap, it's kind of like its purpose is to get something up quickly, and it's grown over the years, so it's used more formally also. But one thing that you have to be mindful of is that Bootstrap takes up a little bit of space, and so you would want to optimize your use of it to where you're only using the components, the CSS for the components that are absolutely needed. So for instance, I have a couple clients that I use Bootstrap with. I use Bootstrap exclusively, actually, just for me personally, because it's easy to use and I'm not a huge front-end guy, at least design-wise. So I usually stick with pre-made themes that use Bootstrap. That way I'm familiar with the syntax right off the bat, and I can customize them quickly. So it's going to vary. The industry is huge, obviously, so some companies are going to use it, others are not. Some are going to use materials, some may use this Tailwind framework, and so on. As far as it being frowned on, it just depends. You might have some purists, like CSS purists, who's like turns up their nose to Bootstrap, but I don't think there's any room for that type of bias in web development. So I would take anything that people like that say with a grain of salt. Alright, so Sumit, am I still doing tutoring sessions? I am. And for anyone that's interested, let me go ahead and, I think it's just tinyurl.com/devsproutbooking. If anybody's interested in tutoring, that should be the link. I'm just going to visit that real quick. Yeah, that's it. I think when you try to book a session, it will ask you for a US phone number. So if you don't have one, if you're living somewhere else and you don't have a US number, just put a fake number in there. I'm not going to use the number anyway. They'll probably just email you. But if like you're having difficulty booking the session, and you don't get asked for money or anything when you book it, you're basically just sending me an email saying, hey, I want to do a tutoring session. Let's see here. Jesse says learn Spring for sure for Java. Cool. Yep, that's what I thought. Brandon, thanks for the answer. No problem. Mohammed, after I learned Node, now looking for a job, almost 9% of the companies need PHP, not Node, so I should go learn PHP. How long does it take? Any recommended resources? So, top-rated tech courses, go to web development, and then go down to this course right here, Complete Web Developer Course 2.0, 4.5 rating. It's been around forever. And this course is by Rob Percival, and he teaches PHP, MySQL, etc. This is the guy. He's been around since before Colt. He used to be Colt's biggest competitor until like Angela Yu and Andre Nyogi came around. So definitely want to check that course out if you're trying to learn PHP to get a job. You didn't get the course you said it was a good follow-up to Colt's. Could you repeat that? Yes. Follow-up course to Colt's is Code with Node, Learn by Doing on Udemy and devsprout.io. Highly recommend that for peeps here. Booked with Ian a few times when I ran into issues. DevSprout website is down. Thanks for the heads up. Let's check that out. Looks like it's working for me, so you'll have to let me know which page you're trying to visit, Sumit. But anyway, thanks for the shout out about the tutoring. Yeah, if anybody's interested in tutoring with me, reach out to me. Click on that tinyurl.com devsprout booking link, and I'll be happy to help you out. Alright, so this was held for review. Learned Colt's courses from starters, but Brad Traversy courses where he makes bigger apps really helped me, like React, Redux, Mongodb, Nodejs, to develop my thinking and coding JavaScript. So yeah, Gregor, that's a good point. Brad has a lot of cool courses. That guy cranks out new courses all the time, and he goes back and revises old ones to keep him up to date. And he has a pretty active YouTube as well, so I would definitely keep an eye on his stuff. If you like his teaching style, then I think there's definitely quite a bit that he has available to learn from. How often do I live stream? Well, I just started live streaming for the first time the other day, and I'm just getting more and more familiar with it. And so while I'm working out the kinks, I'm going to try and do it as often as possible, maybe like 5 times a week or something like that. maybe once on the weekends. So maybe like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday or something, I don't know. So yeah, as often as possible. And then I don't have a set time. I mean, if people felt like that was valuable to have a set time that they could look forward to, I could try to commit to something like that. But I've got 3 kids, they're all younger, and so I'm constantly running around helping my wife, take them to school and all the different things that come along with having a young family, and so I don't typically commit to that kind of thing because it's just a lot to keep up with. But if you need help at a specific time, I do tutoring. You can check out the tinyurl link above, and those are for specific scheduled appointments. But the streaming I'll do as often as possible, and as long as I keep getting some positive feedback, also donations whenever possible. That really helps me stay motivated to be able to continue doing this stuff, because right now I'm doing it for free, obviously, and if I have a little bit of cash coming in from it, then that really helps compensate me for the time that I spend sitting around answering questions or coding stuff like that. How long have I been coding? I think I started making websites when I was like 13, I want to say. Maybe 14, 13, something like that. It kind of started out as graphic design with Photoshop, and then I learned how to turn those into really simple HTML websites. I didn't really understand CSS back then. I used stuff like Microsoft Front Page and Dreamweaver, and then eventually that kind of segued into WordPress. So still, I didn't really know everything there was to know about making websites, but I used WordPress to build stuff, and I actually started getting web development clients back then using WordPress. And so I had a handful of clients, and I had a little small business, and I made money off of it. And it wasn't until I moved to California and enrolled in a part-time Ruby class that I actually truly started dedicating time every day to learning programming. I had previously started trying to learn Ruby on my own maybe a few months prior, and it was difficult because I ran into problems. I didn't know how to find a mentor. I didn't know what Stack Overflow was. I had just gotten into it, and so I had difficulty with that. I had some books, but I had trouble going through them as well. And so I would say being involved in websites and stuff like that has been over a decade. But in terms of programming, I probably started back in 2014, I think. 2014, yeah, sounds right. So 6 years now, and I caught on pretty quick. I took a boot camp right after the part-time course, and I learned JavaScript on top of Ruby, and just kind of kicked things off from there. I started TAing almost right away for General Assembly, and that segued into a TA job over in South Africa for a company called iExperience. That segued into another instructor job assistant instructor job in San Francisco for Galvanize, and then from there I moved back to Texas. More teaching jobs. Finally, I got a Ruby job where I was the only instructor. I was the lead instructor. I had a TA for a little while, and then he quit. So it's just me. I taught that for 3 different cohorts. And then I did some guest teaching at another boot camp, and then just started doing online stuff full time. But anyway, long story short, programming-wise, it's probably been about 6 years. So does Heroku start a new instance of the app every time a new user or browser opens my web page? No. There's one instance running, and it's handling there's one node process that's running. It's handling all the HTTP requests that are coming in. What is my opinion on React hooks? I'm told that it makes everything way easier. I say I'm told because I don't use them, because I don't use React. So don't have much of an opinion on it just because I never use React. But from what I hear, they're really, really great. how important and necessary is jQuery now? So personally, I love jQuery. I use it here and there. It makes writing front-end JavaScript a lot easier, especially in terms of DOM manipulation, but it's not that popular anymore. Now that pretty much everybody that's doing any type of front-end work and anything more than just a small script here and there, they're probably going to use a framework, a front-end framework like Vue or React or Angular. So is it necessary? It just depends on the project. It's nice to know. It only takes like a couple hours to really learn most of it. And if you go work somewhere where they have some legacy code that uses it, then that'll be useful. But otherwise, I wouldn't stress about it too much. You can do everything in jQuery. You can use vanilla JavaScript to do everything that you would do in jQuery, and it's going to be faster. jQuery can be kind of bulky. They have slim version and minified version, etc. But basically what I'm trying to say is it's not really necessary. Like, I've always vouched for jQuery because I like it, but I wouldn't like force anybody to learn it or like recommend that anybody absolutely learn it. It's not crucial. So what JS framework do you work with? So front-end framework, I don't work with any of them because I don't ever use front-end frameworks for any of my clients. I do everything on the back end. And so for my clients, I've used Nodejs, Express.js together, and I've used PHP and Laravel together. And then back in the day, I used to use Ruby and Ruby on Rails, but I haven't done any Rails in a long time. So how do I keep two users from accidentally seeing each other's information if Heroku doesn't start a new instance? So that's not what the instances or the node processes, that's not what stops a user from seeing someone else's information. Authentication is what, in sessions, are what stop users from seeing each other's stuff. You need to be able to log in with the username or email and a password to be able to see your data, and no one else should be able to see that because they'd have to log in, and unless they know your username and password, they're not going to be able to log into your account. So Sumit's saying that he hasn't noticed many courses that show full end-to-end deploying publishing website, and he's asking if there's any chance that I could come up with a course regarding that, including web security. And so that was the intent with Code with Node originally, was to go from planning stage to development stage to deployment of at least a fairly basic minimum viable product, or MVP, and it kind of got derailed. I just got super burned out while creating the course, and so I didn't finish it. And I have been toying with the idea of working on it during these live streams. I almost thought about working on it today, but I'm just pretty exhausted right now, so I chose not to. But that is something that I may be interested in doing in the future. In the meantime, if you're deploying a application with Node and Express has really great documentation about like web security, like what steps to take to make sure that your application is secure while in production. And if you're using Mongodb or MySQL, etc., you can also look up their documentation for what steps you need to take to keep your database secure and up to date. So you heard talk on using Node without Express. It just depends on what you're trying to do. You can use a larger framework called Sails. There's a bunch of frameworks for Node actually. Not all of them are well kept up with, so you'd have to figure out which ones are the best. But personally, I think when it comes to Node, Express is one of the better frameworks. And then of course you could just use plain Node by itself. You could write your own HTTP server and basically do everything that Express does behind the scenes. I would say that's definitely doable. You would have a much more lightweight application, but Express is already pretty lightweight as it is. So if you're doing anything web related, you might as well take advantage of the power that Express has available for you in terms of like creating routes and middleware and stuff like that. What are great projects for putting up in my CV? Projects that are completed. Employers don't want to see, something that's, for lack of a better word, half-assed. They want to see that you're able to see something from start to finish. Not that I want to talk, because I was just talking about that course that I started. Granted, if I wasn't teaching the project, it would have been long done. But building something and teaching it is two different things. So circling back to your question about your CV, if you're going to put projects on there, make sure that they're completed. Even if they're simple projects, make sure that you church them up and make them look pretty nice. Use a little bit of CSS or a pre-made theme or what have you. Just make sure that there's no, if an employer were to use your project, make sure they're not going to run into any error messages or any bugs. So if you hammer out all that stuff, then that is considered a great project to have on your CV. Make that course, please. Yeah, I just might. We shall see. But I wouldn't. I tell students this all the time. I wouldn't wait around for me or anyone else to make the course that that you think you need. You are much better off teaching yourself those things. The sooner you get comfortable reading documentation and learning how to do stuff like that on your own, the better of a developer you'll be overall. So, not saying that courses are a bad thing, but you can't rely on courses for everything. Once you get to a certain level in web development, you shouldn't be taking any courses at all. You should be figuring stuff out on your own. Because if you're always relying on a course and then you get to a job and they say, hey, build us this feature, and you're like, oh, I've never done that. Let me go find a course that teaches that. You may not find a course. You may have to figure it out on your own. And so figuring out how to figure stuff out on your own early is going to be a lot more useful in the real world. What is the name of the stack that Colt teaches? So in his Web Developer Bootcamp course, he calls it the MEN stack. I call it the Nemo stack, but basically it's Mongo, Express, and Node, or in my case, Node, Express, Mongo, and other stuff. It's basically the mean stack or the MERN stack without Angular or React. So the main thing is Node for the backend, Express.js for the backend framework, and then MongoDB for data persistence in a database. So Sonika Gupta, being a noob in development, I'm more into data science. So in case I need to deploy my project in the app or web, are there any possibility to do that easily without learning the whole development? Tech stack, please. Yeah, you might want to find somebody to partner up with that can do that for you. I wouldn't say there's necessarily any shortcuts. Like, some stacks are easier to learn and use than others. Like Ruby on Rails is popular with beginners and boot camps that teach beginners because it's fairly easy syntax to learn and it's fairly easy to get a website built and deployed. Now, is it going to be the most secure website? You'll have to take extra steps to ensure that sort of thing. But I would have to know more about the specifications of your project to really offer you some more concrete advice. But yeah, if you're not wanting to take the time to learn how to do that stuff on your own, then you're probably going to need to sync up with somebody else that already knows how to do it. So Ayub's question is learning Redux necessary? Is that something else that can replace it, or is there something else that can replace it? I think there's some other ones that can be used in place of Redux, but Redux is one of the most popular if you're talking about using it with React. And so is it necessary? If you're building large projects with React, it's going to make your life a lot easier, so I would take the time to learn it. I haven't done any competitive programming. I did like Code Wars for a little while, just like mess around and challenge myself. But as far as competitive programming, I did a hackathon one time, if that counts. And so within I think it was 2 days, we had to build an app, and it was pretty crazy. I built the app with Ruby on Rails and Ionic. So it's a mobile application for iOS and Android. But that's as far as I've gone in terms of competitive programming. Sergio's question is, am I planning to add more features to Yelp Camp? That's a big maybe. I had been talking lately about possibly doing a real-time notifications tutorial. So that might be something that I do in the coming days. So I would say I'm leaning towards yes for more features for Yelp Camp. And possibly, I don't want to make any promises, but maybe going back and refactoring some of the older ones so that they're a little bit easier to follow. Because I did all the tutorials, the add-on tutorials separate, all the extracurricular ones that are on my YouTube, some people found it difficult to follow them, like which one comes first, and the code is different for each one. Some started on Yelp Camp version 11, some started on Yelp Camp Final, so it's kind of hard for people to follow along and figure out like the order of things. So I might go back and refactor those in the future, but all that stuff takes a lot of time, so just have to figure out when I'd be able to do that. So what's the best course for React? You can go to topratedtechcourses.com and then click on front-end frameworks, and you can see all the different courses I have here. They're not all for React, but a lot of them are, like this one for example, and this one, and see which one has the highest rating and which one has an instructor that you like the most. So that website, I guess you couldn't see what I was doing, but topratedtechcourses.com. Yep, PowerPoints with slides.com are helpful. I think so too, and it helps me teach it a little bit easier too if I break it down into steps. Yeah, it can be difficult to kind of wade through that stuff on your own, promises and async await. So I might feature some of that stuff in future tutorials, but I'm kind of digging the live stream stuff, so I might do coding in the live streams and just work on features that way. So maybe not necessarily prepared tutorials, but just open up Yelp Camp and say, all right, I want to make this feature. Let's figure it out together, and then spend like an hour coding, and you know, the live streams will be recorded and uploaded, so you could always follow along and refer back to it if you want to. Yeah, finishing the rest of the course, that's a good idea, for sure. I would finish the course before trying to refactor anything. So for those of you that are still here, I'm just going to plug this one last time. Donations of any amount are always welcome. It definitely would motivate me to continue being able to do the live stream stuff. No obligation there, but any donations are totally appreciated. Gregor, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking questions and supporting my channel, watching my videos, stuff like that. I appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. It's 2:38. If anybody gets like one or two questions in there, I'll be happy to answer them. Super Bowler, I already answered that question earlier, so just watch the, and I've answered it in pretty much almost every live stream since I started live streaming. So short answer is it still a good technology to learn? Personally, I like it, but in terms of like relevance in the industry, it's not super relevant anymore. So also, if you need to pick it up for a job, if they're like, hey, we use Jquery, you need to know it, you could learn it in like a day. So I wouldn't stress over it. So if you want to learn to make notifications or a shop cart system without a course or tutorials, you want to rely on yourself, what resources would you use? So tutorials would probably be good for the shopping cart, unless you understand the patterns that are necessary for making a shopping cart. So it might be worthwhile to follow a tutorial or a course for that, because it's a really difficult concept to figure out on your own. I mean, you could try to if you want to, but you'd probably save yourself some time if you found a decent tutorial and at least used it as a starting point. And then notifications, like real-time notifications. Look up Pusher. They have a tutorial for their service. They have a free trial or whatever it is that you can use. And then look up an alternative to that would be sockets. And then I think they're called web workers or whatever in modern browsers for doing like push notifications. So you might look into that too. And I think Brad Traversy has a tutorial there. You don't have to follow tutorials for that stuff. Like I said, you can look up documentation. But yeah, that is what I would recommend doing. Documentation if you're not going to use tutorials or courses. Sumit, looking forward to seeing you for another session. I appreciate it. I will not be doing a course on native app development, at least React Native, not right now. You can check out the link above for topratedtechcourses.com. There's a React Native course on there. Just click on the front-end frameworks or the mobile development. It'll be in both of those sections. How would you create an interactive interface that allows the user to explore 3 debts, car, credit card, line of credit, over and how they're paid off over the months and years? That's not something I can like answer verbally. I mean, I could show you how to do it in a tutoring session. It wouldn't just be one session. That's like hours and hours of work. So your follow-up is create an interface that's engaging and is simple for the user to explore all values. It must do this without being overwhelming or confusing to the user. Sample data is organized into a JSON file with keys, dates, credit card, line of credit, and contributions. Yeah, so that's a you're talking about a very complex application that several people might be working on together at like a startup. And if one person does it by themselves, it's going to take them quite a while. So in terms of like telling you how to do it, that's not something I can just say like, oh yeah, easy peasy, just do X, Y, and Z. Like that's something that you need to plan out and learn how to plan out. If you don't already know how to plan that kind of thing out, you can check out my Code Node course, which offers how like steps for how to plan that kind of stuff and then execute it. So this was an interview for a startup. Interview question. It's a pretty loaded question. I mean, if you wanted to explain like an overview of how you would do it, you have a JSON file, then you would access the data from the JSON file, and then you could render it in a table. That might be the nice way because it's whatchamacallit, that's the type of thing that you would put in a spreadsheet, right? Like showing these different number values over the course of time. And if you want to get really fancy, then you could use like what's it called, d3.js, which is like for data visualization. And you could find some fancy way to like show that data to the user, or you could just go tried and true with like a table for like a spreadsheet type rendering. But in terms of like the exact steps on how to do it, that's like a whole thing. I don't know how you would answer that in a single interview unless it was like a 12-hour interview or something. Is it easy to add a reservation in PayPal payments to Yelp Camp like using Node.js? Yeah, you can use the PayPal documentation for how to set up payments. I think Stripe is probably easier, but you might try both and see which one is easier to work with. So you're doing an app for a store and you'd like for a new shopping cart to be created for each unique user that comes to the page. Is there a Node package I can use for this? I'm not familiar with any packages. I'm sure there probably are. Packages are basically just pre-written code that are wrapped up in a package to make it easier to use. But if you can find one on NPM, great. If not, you just need to implement a shopping cart. So you'd have to create a class for a cart and then use sessions to store the cart until you get to the checkout, at which point you would get the person's money. If it's successful, take the item out of inventory, create a receipt, assign the receipt to the user, send an email, etc. Loved my Git tutorial, simple and gorgeous. Thanks, man. I found you from the WDV course. Thanks, Abid. I appreciate that. I'm glad that was useful for you. All right, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. And before you leave, I think I said it was the last time, but I'm going to do it one more time. If you feel generous, smash that PayPal button and send me $1. Appreciate it. See y'all next time. Probably do another one tomorrow, so stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.